Hello, welcome. We're going to give the audience a couple of minutes to join us tonight. So if you're just joining us, thank you for joining. We will be getting started shortly. Please add your questions into the Q&A option during the presentations. They will be answered after the presentations. All right, we have a good number going. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Hello, I'm Laura Gallegos, Public Affairs Specialist for SCV Water. Welcome to tonight's webinar, Water Matters After the Storm. Kathy, if you could please share the PowerPoint.
One second.
No worries, we're going to give folks a couple of seconds more to join us while Kathy gets set up. If you are just joining us, we do not have a chat option, but please enter your questions into the Q&A while we are presenting. We will get started in a couple of seconds. All right, looks like we're ready to go. Welcome to tonight's webinar, Water Matters After the Storm. Kind of nice that it is actually raining outside too while we're doing this. Next slide. We are glad you could join us. Tonight's presentation should last approximately 1 hour with 30 minutes of Q&A at the end. We encourage you to enter your questions during the presentation into the Q&A box, and they will be answered at the end. Tonight's webinar is being recorded, and a link to view the recording will be sent out to everyone who registered. We will also be sending out a survey to hear from you and what you thought about tonight's Water Matters topic. Water Matters is a fairly new webinar series that we have launched. We will be hosting quarterly webinars covering timely and interesting topics. So look for that in your inbox. Next slide. Oh, we have a poll. If you could please launch that, Kathy. So our first question to you is, do you think the drought is over now? Okay. Like we have a lot of no's. All right, so most of us don't think the drought is over yet. Tonight we will be hearing from Sarah, Ernesto, and Matt, who will share a little bit more about that. During the event, SCV Water's Conservation and Water Resources staff will answer your questions and share key information, including water supplies, project infrastructure, and the drought outlook. Tonight, you will hear from our panel of subject matter experts, Water Resources Planner Sarah Fleury and Ernesto Velasquez, and from our Water Resources Department, and our Sustainability Manager, Matt Dickens, from the Water Conservation Department. And I will be moderating the questions in chat. If all the speakers could please come online. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Sarah.
Thank you, Laura. You guys can hear me okay? Thumbs up. Okay, well, thank you everybody for joining us this evening. I'm Sarah Fleury. Again, I'm a water resources planner. And the first thing we're going to do is just go through conditions before the storm. I'm going to go through the actual storms and what water supply impacts they had. And then Ernesto is going to talk about the local impacts from the storm, and Matt's going to talk about drought response and conservation in action. And I thought it would be interesting. The photo that I have up here actually shows a before and after photo from space taken 1 year apart after the storms. The storms brought, it was about 9 atmospheric rivers dumped more than 30 trillion gallons of water in California in a little more than 3 weeks. And from these pictures from space, you can actually see some of the deep valley landscapes, tall mountains and coastlines that got visibly altered from these storms. It was a pretty huge impact. Next. So we're going to start out with conditions before the storms. Next. When we talk about storms, it really has a lot to do with our water supply. And so the first thing I wanted to cover real quickly is Santa Clarita Valley's existing water supply portfolio. And a water supply portfolio is basically just all the different sources of water that we have available to utilize throughout the year in different years to meet our customers' water needs. So we break those out into 2 groups. We have our imported supplies, which come from outside of Santa Clarita Valley. That includes water that we get from our state water project. And I'm sure some of you have seen the aqueduct that runs along I-5 as you drive north towards San Francisco. And then we have a bunch of dry year reserves in the Central Valley that we utilize that come from outside of our service area as well. And then we have our local supplies, which are groundwater and recycled water supplies. Next. So when our water supplies are extremely dependent on levels of precipitation of rain and snow, and that's locally and statewide. And California has the US's greatest variations in these extremes. And so coin the phrase the weather whiplash, because California basically can go from drought and flood from one year to the next, pretty much exactly like what we're seeing now this year. And so the graphics that I have shown here give us examples of atmospheric river storms, which are indicated by the arrows hitting the coast of California. And there's a comparison of 2019 on the left-hand side and 2022 on the right-hand side. And so you can see those extremes. And when I talk about atmospheric rivers, those are huge amounts of moisture that come in from the coast, and they tend to bring just large amounts of rain and snow to California during our winter wet season. And so on the graphic, you can see in 2019, there was about 14 atmospheric rivers that hit the coast of California between January and March that year. And in comparison, last year, 2022, we had 1, and it was a weak one on top of that. So we don't have a very long winter season to get our precipitation. And so a lot of these storms are very important for us to meet those historical averages. And we have that weather whiplash going on. Next slide. In addition, the last few years have been extremely hot and dry. And so we've had prolonged drought periods that we've been dealing with. And the graphic here shows a sequence of drought maps of California, kind of showing us the different drought classifications at the beginning of each winter. And so as the colors go from white to dark red, the drought classifications are intensified. And so you can see we started out 2019, the year of all those atmospheric rivers hitting our coast. We really didn't have much drought classification throughout California. But as we moved through the next couple years, it got very intense. And before the winter of 2021, you can see the entire map is covered in drought classifications. So 100% of the state was in drought, and a lot of it was exceptional drought in that dark red. And then the last map to the right shows where we were at the beginning of this winter. There was some improvements, but Central California was still in exceptional drought. And our area was kind of between D3 and D2. Next slide. So with variation in water year types, there's wet, there's dry. SCV Water utilizes different supplies for different year types. And so this graphic shows what supplies we use in these in the average and wet years versus the dry years. And so you can see in an average and wet year, we really rely on that imported supply from the state. When we get lots of rain and lots of snow up north, we have a lot of surface water supplies that we can lean on. And in addition, we utilize our local supplies. But as we shift to those dry years, you can see how much our imported supplies are constrained when we don't get that rain, we don't get that snow. So we have our local supplies, but we have to rely on those dry year reserves to meet about half of our demands and make sure that our customers have the water that they need. Next slide. So dry year reserve investments have been extremely crucial in helping us meet demands through these extreme dry periods like we've seen the past few years. And an example of these reserves would be like our water banking programs. So in wet years, when we have surplus water, we can actually store some of that surplus in our water banking programs located in the Central Valley. And then we can pull that water in dry years and use it when we need it. It's kind of like throwing your savings from a large tax return in your bank and saving it until that day that your car fails and you have to pay for that expensive repair. Very similar. So the graphic that you see here shows our dry year reserve storage at the beginning of the drought in 2020 and how we utilized this water each year and where we are now. So, and it shows the water year type under each year as well. So we had a dry year in 2020, critical, and 2 critical years the following 2 years. And this year is still yet to be determined, but we started our dry year reserves at a little over 160,000 acre feet. And at the beginning of this year, we have 90,000 acre feet. So again, these have been really critical in helping us get through these long, prolonged drought periods. Next slide. In addition, we've also seen huge variability in the precipitation patterns locally. And so this graphic shows us kind of 2 things. In 2019, this is an example of when those 14 atmospheric rivers hit California. And on the graphic, I've got our historical average, which breaks down basically how much rain Santa Clarita tends to get historically per month in the water year. And then you've got the blue bars, which represent how much water we actually got that year. So you can see in 2019, we had pretty normal year, except for January and February were much above of the historical average during those months. On average, we get about 17 inches of rain per year. And in 2019, we had about 21.5 inches. Next slide. Moving through the drought years, 2020, same graphic. You can see there's just a huge gap in January and February, and those are the wettest months of our year. Overall, we ended up below average in 2020. Next. In 2021, you can see we had below average precipitation the entire winter, and this winter we actually only ended up with about a little over 3 inches of rain the entire year. It's one of our driest years on record in this valley. Next. 2022 or last year, you can see we had below average precipitation basically the entire winter, except for a huge storms that we got in December, where we ended up with about 4 times the amount of our normal precipitation all at once. And even with that huge amount of rain in December, we still ended up overall below average that year. Next slide. On a statewide level, we're also seeing very similar variability in overall precipitation, but also in snowpack. So just like Santa Clarita Valley had 4 times the amount of precipitation in December at the end of 2021, you can see on the graphic on the right-hand side a similar trend. The graphic on the right shows the historical snowpack average in that like light blue bell curve. And then you've got the actual snowpack that year in the purple line. And you can see that there was no snow basically October through November. And then we had that huge storm come in. We went above average snowpack for that time of year, but then we had the driest January through April period on record in 128 years. And so it basically flatlined and started melting prior to when it should be peaking historically in April. And then you can see the snow melted early, and then the picture that you see there is actually DWR doing the snow survey on April 1st. And again, this is when the snowpack should be at its highest level historically, and you can see all the dirt behind them. So basically the snow was almost gone at that point, which is extremely early. Next slide. So let's get into the storms, which we're not talking about the storms that just happened this last week or today when it was snowing. We're talking about the storms that occurred between December 26th and January 17th. So these storms, another atmospheric river graphic here showing what actually happened during that time period. We had 9 atmospheric rivers make landfall between that time period, and 5 of them were strong or greater magnitude. Since they started monitoring atmospheric rivers in 2012, California has actually averaged about 6.5 atmospheric rivers per year. And so we got 9 in a little bit over 3 weeks, but we should get less than that in an entire year. In comparison, the last couple of years, we had the 1 atmospheric river in 2022, and I believe before that, we only had 2 the year before. So that's a lot of precipitation that came all at once. Next. Locally, from these storms, you can see the impact they had on our precipitation. And so November was pretty normal. December was above average. January, almost 2.5 times the normal amount of rain we get. And then I just added this information from February yesterday, but basically there was no precipitation from January 16th to February 23rd. So over a month of no rain. And then just in this last couple days, we had 8 inches of rain. And so for February, we're already 2 times the amount of rain for that month. Next slide. And then the snowpack after the storm. So about 30% of our water supplies come from the state snowpack each year. And the graphic at the bottom, again, similar to the one I just showed you before. You can see the historical April 1st average there, and then you can see where our snowpack is currently in that purple line. So basically what's happened this year is that since those storms started in December and January, we have been above average levels this entire winter. And it's just been a combination of really big storms and very cold temperatures to hold that snowpack in place. And so currently we are at 181% of our normal to date snowpack, and we've already have more than we would need at the April 1st peak. And we still have 1 month to go. So we'll get to see what happens. Next slide. Impact on our reservoirs statewide. So reservoirs are very important in our state water project system. They basically store water in the winter when we have really low demands because it's cold and nobody needs to irrigate in the winter. And then they help us store that water and deliver water in the summertime when the water needs are much higher for customers. So Lake Oroville Reservoir is one of the primary reservoirs for our state water project, and it holds over 3.5 million acre feet of water. It's currently at 72% of its capacity. You can see the picture there in the bottom corner of what it looks like when it's full. And then the graphic here shows the historical average in that light blue color, and then dry year 1 is indicated in red. We've got dry year 2 and kind of how the reservoir flowed that drought year in blue. Dry year 3 is in green. And then what's happened and where we are currently this year is indicated in blue. And so you can see the storms that we had in December had a huge impact on the reservoir levels. And so this has been very beneficial to helping us kind of get out of those low trends in Lake Oroville. Next. I thought it would be fun to kind of show some other pictures. This is a huge reservoir. So I've got some pictures up here which compare the lowest levels in Oroville in 2021. And then the picture right below it actually shows the reservoir at that same location after the storms. Since the storms in December, the water levels have increased about 800 feet or 1.5 million acre feet since December. And I have a little graphic there showing us what an acre foot of water is, because that's kind of our water lingo in our business. But an acre foot of water is basically enough water to serve 2 families of 4 in a year. And you can see that graphic. If you visualize an acre foot of water, it's about a foot of water deep over a football field. So it's quite a bit of water. And again, Oroville raised 1.5 million acre feet since December. Next slide. And a few more pictures. You've got the lowest levels on top and then after the storms on the bottom. And it's just, I think it's pretty incredible to see how the reservoir changes as it goes up and down. And so in summary, for the water supply section, we've had above average precipitation locally. We've had above average snowpack statewide. Our reservoirs are filling. We've got imported water supplies that are increasing for us. We're looking at shifting our operations from those dry year conditions to maybe an average or wet year type. There's still some time before we make that full decision, but we still have one more month of our rainy season left as well. Statewide, different areas have received different portions of precipitation and some more than others. So groundwater levels and how much of the snow is going to run off into the reservoirs remains to be determined. So the full impact these storms have had on drought recovery still remains an open question. And water managers are cautioning, that no single wet winter could reverse the impacts of many years of below average precipitation. So thank you everyone for listening this evening, and I'm going to pass it on to Ernesto now, who's going to talk about our local impacts.
Thank you, Sarah. All right. So it looks like we have a poll question number 2. Go ahead and give that an answer, or see if should be an easy question. We'll see who is paying attention to Sarah's presentation. All right. Did everyone get their answers in? There we go. Look, almost everyone got that right. So how much water is in an acre foot of water? That's right, over 300,000 gallons in 1 acre foot of water. Why is that important? Well, units are important, so we know the volumes of water that we're dealing with. And when we are ordering water or producing water, you can imagine if we were to use gallons, the numbers would have a lot of zeros very quickly. So we use acre feet when we are producing water, or when we are purchasing water, importing water, I should say. So when you hear me talk and you hear the volumes that we're referring to, is going to be in acre feet. So 1 acre foot is over 300,000 gallons. All right, moving on. So I'm going to review some of our current efforts here. And we'll go into depth into these projects, but I also want to do some background information on just how water moves throughout the Santa Clarita Valley, so that you can see what happens to the water during the storm event here locally. So there are ongoing projects around SCV Water to help the groundwater resources, our groundwater table, to recover. And as Sarah explained, groundwater is a critical source for our valley, especially in times of drought, because there's less imported water available. And as these droughts are becoming more regular and lengthier, it's going to become more challenging for groundwater levels to recover locally. Why is that? Well, if you see on the top right, we have the natural recharge diagram. And you can imagine when it rains, that rain gets conveyed through the creeks, makes its way to the Santa Clara River here locally, and the soil absorbs that rain and helps percolate that water down into the aquifers below. So when there's less rain events, there is less recharge that's happening to our local aquifers. So to help keep our groundwater levels recharged, the Water Resources Department, we're working on some new projects to help utilize excess water when demands are lower, so that we can store it locally, meaning in years when we don't use or need as much water, we'll be able to store that locally. And if you can go back one slide, Kathy, what we mean about storing it and using it locally would be the managed recharge on the bottom right here. just be a man-made basin. You can think of it as a pool, essentially, where we can store water when we have it available to us so that it can recharge the aquifer underneath, and we could extract that water later on down the line when we need it. So to better understand the projects here, the Castaic Creek, the city project, and groundwater, let's do some quick background on just how water flows throughout Santa Clarita Valley, and then we can go into the details of the projects. Next, please. Thank you, Kathy. So here's a beautiful overview of our Santa Clarita Valley. Just to help get you oriented, we have the Castaic Lake on the top left of the map. We have everyone's favorite freeway, the 5 freeway, running down the left side, the 14 freeway on the right. So that would be the Canyon Country Pine Tree area. And right down the middle, we have this undeveloped streak, and that would be the Santa Clara River, which makes its way out to the Ventura, Los Angeles County line. So underneath the Santa Clarita Valley, we have 2 aquifers. We have the alluvial and the Saugus aquifers, and it's kind of hard to see on this overview. So what we have on the next slide here is a view of the alluvial and Saugus aquifers underneath all the buildings, parks, and the development. If you're just getting an idea of the soil underneath, you can see that in blue, we have the alluvial aquifer, and the alluvial aquifer is a shallower aquifer. And you can see the design that it makes, and that's because it runs along the same path as the creeks and the river, making its way out to the Ventura County line. The yellow portion is the Saugus aquifer, and that's a much deeper aquifer. The blue dots that are around with the W's, those are wells that are located throughout the Santa Clarita Valley. And they pool from both the alluvial and the Saugus aquifers. So these wells are at different depths. Now, when it rains here locally, the general flow of the water, next please, Kathy, is going from the Canyon Country area down towards to the left towards the Ventura County line. So all the creeks and the river gathers that storm water and helps recharge those aquifers below the surface. So for those of you who haven't really thought about aquifers, or this is the first time you're hearing about it, it's pretty hard to visualize. So on the next slide here, we have a side view. This is not to scale, but should give you an idea of the aquifers. Next, please. So we'll start off with the Saugus Formation. That's the deeper aquifer that is underlying the Santa Clarita Valley. And then we also have the alluvial aquifer above that. Now, along with those two, you can see on the left-hand side here, we have Saugus wells, and we also have alluvial wells. Now, the Saugus wells have to go deeper, down up to a couple thousand feet to extract water from the Saugus aquifer. And the alluvial aquifer, you can see, is much shallower, overlying the Saugus aquifer. Those wells only go down to a maximum of a couple hundred feet. So when it rains, these are the aquifers that are getting recharged underneath. Next slide, please. All right, so I don't know how many of you have actually gotten a chance to see a well. So we have a picture here of a well. Maybe you picture the old Westerns where you have a hand crank and you're pumping the well by hand, or maybe some of you imagine the holes in the ground and you throw your bucket in with the rope and you pull up 1 bucket of water. But we've gotten a long way since then, and we have these electric pumps. They come in different shapes and sizes, but this is a vertical turbine pump. And next, please, Kathy. What it does is it pumps the water out of the aquifers, puts it into distribution pipes, and sends it out all over the valley so that customers and businesses can use the water. Now, the locally managed supply of this groundwater is what helps us get through drought periods. As Sarah said, during those dry times, it's hard to import water. So having a local supply when it's hard to get water here is invaluable. In 2022, the groundwater accounted for about 38% of our overall supplies that year. And that percentage will fluctuate from year to year, depending on the year type, whether it's a wet year or a dry year, and how we're going to operate that year. So that'll fluctuate, but extremely important and helps us during our drought periods. Next slide, please. Okay, so getting into water storage projects. So those 3 projects at the beginning, let's dive in a little deeper. We have the Castaic Lagoon release. You can see in the yellow on the top left, we have a yellow diamond. The city county stormwater compliance project over there on the right side in the Canyon Country area. And we also have groundwater recharge studies that are being conducted in Santa Cruz Valley. And you can see that on the east end over in the Pine Tree Canyon Country area on the right in the blue star, and near the Castaic area on the top left. So let's start off with the Castaic Lagoon release. So after a rain event, the Department of Water Resources, which is the agency that operates the Castaic Lake and Castaic Lagoon releases, they are able to manage those releases. And the importance of that is, you can imagine, let's say we have 2 days of just really hard rain. It doesn't give the soil a lot of time to soak up that rain. It just flows downstream really quickly. So what DWR is able to do when it's possible and when it's needed, is they're actually able to release water from the lagoon at a slower rate. So instead of just a 2-day rain event, maybe they can release that volume slowly over the next week or the next few days or so, to give the soil underneath the ability to properly saturate so that it can recharge the aquifers underneath. Now, the picture on the top, that's a view of one of the releases from Castaic Lagoon. And you know, it's this is an older picture, but you can see it was a wet year because the mountains in the back are green, and we know during drought periods those are they're very brown mountains. So this was a good wet year. On the bottom left, we have 2 pictures. That's the bridge. If you've ever been to the Castaic Lake or Castaic Lagoon, there's a bridge that goes over the outfall where the water is released. And as it makes its way downstream, you can see the pipes there on the bottom middle picture. There are some areas where you need to cross the creek. So there's these overpasses, and the water's funneled through these pipes so that it can make its way downstream. And the last picture there is just a beautiful shot of the water as it's flowing downstream towards the Santa Clara River. Next slide, please. Okay, so next project is the City County Stormwater Compliance Project. This is a city project, but it does relate to groundwater recharge. So it's the Canyon Country Community Center, and there's a nice picture of the Canyon Country Community Center there on the bottom left. It's located right where that triangle is. You can see it's near the intersection of Sierra Highway and Soledad Canyon Road. And the importance of this facility is that it's able to capture stormwater and urban water flows. Next, please, Kathy. So you can imagine it doesn't rain too often in Santa Cruz, with the exception of we've had a lot of rain recently here. But during the initial rain event, so imagine it's summertime, it hasn't rained in months, and we get our first rain event. There's a lot of debris, trash, and leaves and everything that gets caught up in the water flows, makes its way to storm drains. And as you saw in the animation, it makes its way down to the Santa Clara River. So what this facility does is it siphons off some of that water, especially during initial storm events, and it's able to remove some of that trash before it makes its way to the river. And the water is then conveyed into these underground infiltration basins, which I'll show you on the next slide. But what it does is it minimizes the debris and improves the water quality going to the Santa Clara River, while also recharging the basin underneath. So let's go ahead and take a look at what those basins look like. So we were able to get some pictures during construction. We were able to take a visit, and these are big metal pipes. You can see on the right-hand side, we're standing inside one of these pipes, and it's perforated pipe, so it has a bunch of holes in it. So once that trash is removed from those initial storm events or the urban water runoff, that water is able to go through these pipes, which is built underneath the parking area of the Canyon Country Community Center. So amazing engineering, amazing project that was done here. And that water is able to slowly percolate into the soil, surrounding soil, and recharge the aquifer. But you can see the scale of the project and the size of these pipes. So next slide, please. All right, so the last project I want to show you is the groundwater recharge feasibility studies. So first off, what is a feasibility study? Well, you can imagine when you're trying to implement a project, you have to first see, is it possible? Is it possible to do this? So in this case, there's a site in Castaic, and we wanted to answer the question, is it possible to recharge water here? So in our journey to answer that question, we had to collect some data, and that way we can see if it's possible to implement a managed recharge basin. So going back to that initial diagram from the earlier slides, the managed recharge basin would be this, you think of it as a pool where we're able to put water when we have additional water supplies to be able to recharge and allow it to just percolate naturally into the soil so that the aquifers below could store that water and we can recover it later. So that's the question we wanted to answer. Is it possible to do a recharge here? Next slide, please, Kathy. So in order to answer that question, we conducted feasibility studies. Now, if you recall, there was 2 study locations, Pine Tree and Castaic. We're still working on the Pine Tree portion, so I don't have any good pictures, but this is some great pictures from the Castaic portion of the study. On the top left, you can see that you see this pit in the ground and this water truck filling it up with water. And that is the infiltration, that's an infiltration test pit. What they do is they excavate the soil into a known size, and then they fill up that hole with a known volume of water so that they can measure the infiltration rate of the water, meaning how fast is the soil sucking up that water. And if you do that at a couple locations, you can get an idea of how much water can the soil in this area handle if we were to implement a recharge project. So that's one point of data. We need to collect numerous points of data. So on the bottom left, you can see this big drill rig, and they were drilling a monitoring well. Monitoring well will allow us to monitor the groundwater levels at the location, but also as they're drilling the well, we're able to take soil samples every 5 feet or so to get an idea of the geology beneath the surface. Because if you're doing a recharge project, you don't want to have shallow bedrock, meaning it's just rock underneath and there's nowhere for the soil to percolate down to. This rock is not going to absorb water. So in the process of drilling the monitoring well, we were also able to get an idea of the soil underneath. The third data point that we were able to capture is this big picture in the middle, and it's you can see this gentleman in the ATV pulling the dual M system, and you can think of it as a ground penetrating radar system, which is able to go across the site and see what the soil content below is. So combining the infiltration testing, the soil sampling, groundwater monitoring, as well as the groundwater penetrating radar, we're able to combine that all into a groundwater model, which takes mathematical, is able to use those data points into a mathematical model to determine how much recharge is capable, are we able to recharge at this location. So the conclusion of this study determined that we were able to infiltrate or recharge about 5,000 acre-feet per year at this location, which is great news. SCV Water has not had experience in implementing a recharge basin, so this work is really foundational in helping us move forward with being able to implement our first managed recharge basin out here in SCV in the Santa Clarita Valley. So our homework, the next steps for this are really to, now that we know that the site is conducive for groundwater recharge. We need to answer questions. What kind of permitting do we need? What kind of engineering is necessary? What kind of maintenance is it going to need? And there's a lot of next steps that we're going to be answering and exploring over the next couple of years. So just to recap, we have numerous projects throughout SCV Water. We're able to manage, DWR is able to manage groundwater, stormwater releases. My apologies. The city is taking stormwater and cleaning it up before it makes it to the river, and is also helping recharge our groundwater locally. And we're also looking into manage recharge basins at a couple of different locations. So hopefully that gives you an idea of how water flows throughout Santa Clarita Valley, and what the current efforts are right now. And there will be more to come, but that is my portion of the presentation. Thank you for your attention, and I will pass it on to Matt for the next portion of the presentation. So thank you all.
All right, good evening, everybody. I'm Matt Dickens, Sustainability Manager here at SCV Water, and I want to, of course, thank all of you for spending your evening with us. Thank you very much. And also thank you very much to Ernesto and Sarah providing such elucidating information on the impacts of these storms on our water supplies, as well as the activities to put those supplies into storage, into groundwater storage here in the Valley. Quickly, before I go to the poll question, I do want to remind our participants tonight that if you would like to provide questions to the panel, you can do so by using the Q&A feature, which is located at the bottom of the webinar platform. So with that, let's go ahead and turn to our poll question number 3. All right, so where do you believe most of the water waste occurs? And you can choose a single choice here. Is it outdoor irrigation, filling, refilling pools, teenagers, gotta watch out for those, dishwashers, or leaks? Where do you think most water waste occurs? I'll give you folks another moment here to answer. Okay, let's see how the response looks. It looks like about 65% thought it was outdoor irrigation, and that is correct. The majority of water waste, as we've identified it and been able to determine, about 60 to 70% of the total water usage in the Valley can be attributed to irrigation use. And from that, studies as well as anecdotal evidence notes that about 50% of that often is wasted either through evaporation losses, over irrigation, irrigation runoff, or broken sprinklers or those types of things. So that's right. Outdoor irrigation is where most water waste occurs. Although a lot of folks also answered with leaks. I'm surprised nobody chose teenagers, though. I'm from all the community engagement I've done over my career, that topic seems to pop up quite a bit. But leaks, indeed, I think if you're looking at it from a perspective of water waste as an activity, leaks are certainly not a good use of water. They're not a beneficial use. 100% of the usage associated with a leak would be waste. So in that sense, that's also a really good answer. But in terms of volume and where most water waste occurs, it would be in outdoor irrigation. Great. Next. So what I'm going to show here is the drought in California kind of over the past few months. We're going to see a quick animation. It already kind of started, but this is May 3rd, 2022. And as you can see, 100% of the state is experiencing some level of drought, with a good percentage of the state experiencing an extreme drought. Next. As we move to December 6th, 2022, this is just 2 months ago. And well, about 3 months ago. And what we're seeing here is that some of the state is experiencing exceptional drought, and a lot experiencing extreme drought, but still 100% of the state minus a little sliver of the northwest corner in abnormally dry. So this is just 3 months ago. Next slide, or next click. Here we go to January 3rd, and we can start to see the impacts of the December rains, where it cleared out all of that exceptional drought. The intensity started to reduce. And then we can see what happened between January and February. Significant decrease in the extreme drought levels. 100% of the state is pretty much nearly experiencing abnormally dry conditions or some level of drought intensity, but the extreme intensity levels, those extreme and exceptional droughts, category D3 and D4, were reduced and cleared out by the January rains. So it's very likely tomorrow the next drought map will be released. So this was from a week ago, and we're really anxiously looking forward to seeing how those results pan out, which I imagine will continue to see a reduction in the level of intensity and drought across the state. All right, next. So I think many folks are currently wondering, in light of this deluge of rain and precipitation, how are the state regulations regarding drought and those local regulations regarding drought response, how are those going to maintain, or are those going to continue? At this point in time, the regulations remain in effect. And those range from the activities that the governor declared, including the 15% of 2020 voluntary conservation call, the banning of non-functional turf irrigation with potable water, as well as the requirement that all water agencies enact the stage 2 measures of their water shortage contingency plans. All of those were enacted last May, and so those remain in effect at least until June, as far as the ordinance and the emergency resolutions and regulations state. In terms of SCV Water's water shortage contingency plan, we enacted stage 2 in April, and those restrictions and that component of the water shortage contingency plan remain in effect. Next. So what is a water shortage contingency plan? Well, essentially that's a planning effort and a strategy that the agency implements, or water agencies implement, in this case SCV Water, to do two things really. One, to mitigate a water shortage from happening, but also two, to mitigate water shortage issues when they occur. And those include a large range of strategies, including long-term drought sustainable actions, supply augmentation, all these different strategies, restrictions and additional measures for us to accomplish in the stage 2 level up to 20% voluntary conservation. Next. In terms of drought programs, SCV Water has a very robust water conservation program portfolio designed to help our customers meet their various and varying water conservation goals. And during a drought, we tend to rebrand and retool those so that we can help customers not only implement long-term conservation strategies and technologies at their homes, but also to help them meet those current drought conditions. So kind of a short-term benefit as well as a long-term benefit there. And our programs include things like lawn replacement rebates, drought-ready checkups, smart controller rebates, rebates for high-efficiency irrigation improvements and landscape optimization, drip conversion rebates, irrigation checkups, online workshops, education classes. And for those of you who'd like to learn more about what programs we do offer, you can find those at yourscvwater.com or access them at droughtreadyscv.com. Next. And in terms of the watering waste restrictions that we have as part of our water shortage contingency plan and ordinance, those include common activities. The water waste restrictions are specific to those common water waste activities, as well as to help mitigating or reducing the water losses due to over-irrigation and irrigation waste. So in this case, that includes irrigation runoff. We prohibit that, washing hard surfaces with with water instead of using a broom, washing your car without a hose nozzle, and irrigating during and after rain. Although I might need to add and update this to say irrigating during and after rain and or snow, as it was snowing this afternoon here in the Valley. But really these measures, while they're certainly very helpful for us to be reminded of and implement during a drought, they're really applicable anytime. Conservation, water use efficiency is an active kind of endeavor, meaning that it's something we need to constantly work on, to update, to improve through technologies, behaviors, and other practices. But we put together this little tongue twister here that kind of helps state that. which is whatever the weather may be, whether the weather be drought or whether the status of drought be in doubt, saving water is undeniably the sensibly smart and wise route, regardless of whether water is saved either by spigot or spout. Next slide, please. Other tips that we have, and this is really applicable right now, and this is in line with the, the sound of music, which is kind of using observation and community observation to determine, do I need to irrigate, and how long can that precipitation and cool temperatures benefit me before I need to kick on my sprinklers? Well, look around. When the hills are alive around Santa Clarita Valley, it's time to turn your sprinklers off. And so typically what that means is that, in January, February, March, we have green hills. You look at the hills, are they green? Are the south-facing slopes green? If that's the case, chances are, most likely, you don't need to water your turf grass. If your turf grass is brown right now, that's because it's a warm season grass and it doesn't require irrigation. It's actually dormant. No matter how much you water it, it's not going to turn green. But if it's green and it's a cool season grass and it's green, you don't need to water. And if the hills are alive, then you don't need to water either. But you probably do need to start watering in April, May at minimum, and then into the peak irrigation seasons. And then as we go back into the fall, when the water year starts up again and those hills turn green with cool temperatures and precipitation, you can turn those sprinklers off again. So again, when the hills are alive, think of the old classic musical, Sound of Music, as a great way to use the hills around us to determine whether or not we need to kick our sprinklers on. Next slide. All right, so now I'm going to talk about SCV water demand performance. That's drought conservation in the valley during the drought. Next slide. So our first slide here is essentially a chart that shows us our water production compared to 2020, which is again, the governor's call for 15% reduction, voluntary reduction compared to 2020. The dark blue bars are 2020 monthly production in acre feet. And then you've got 2022 production, which is light blue, and then that continues into 2023 in January. We've yet to receive February's numbers, but we'll probably get those this week. And then the dashed line is the 15% of the dark blue bar. Well, as you can see, as we started off in 2022, we were slightly below in January, but then those dry, hot conditions hit in February, March, and April, and our water usage greatly it was greatly above our 2020 levels. And so, Kathy, if you hit the space bar, here is when SCV Water declared its stage 2 water shortage contingency plan and ordinance. And then look at what starts happening in May. In May, our 2022 production starts to decrease relative to 2020, and the delta between those two benchmarks there starts to increase, meaning that more water is being conserved by the community. And that starts to meet our target of 15% reduction in September. And then we met it in October. We surpassed it in November, but then the storms hit. If you hit the space bar again, here comes the storms, and you can see what happens to our water usage relative to our 2020. And that's because, again, I think a lot of folks are paying attention to the green hills. The hills are alive. The storms have been persistent and providing quite a bit of local precipitation. Our yards are green. They don't need to be watered. And we're seeing that people are turning their sprinkler systems off for the most part. And that trend continued into January. So good work to SCV, to our customers as well as the community. When we look at conservation too, in terms of community performance, we like to then look at it by various different sectors of the public and our service area. And those sectors include single and multifamily residential customers, dedicated irrigation customers, and commercial, industrial, and institutional customers. So from May 2022 through January 2023, SCV Water's conservation as a whole was down 15.2%. That's really great jobs for our community. How did we accomplish that? It really was all hands on deck, everybody participating to move towards that common goal of achieving water conservation while we were depending on those banked water supplies. So that really helps us put those supplies to greater use and stretch their use to cover more demands. A single and multifamily water conservation was down 11% compared to that same period in 2020. Dedicated irrigation, that's all your landscapes, your parks, anything that's has a dedicated irrigation meter was also down 11%. So that's huge. When we turn to commercial, industrial, institutional, the data here is a little bit, there's a little bit of noise there, if you will. Commercial usage was up 23%, where industrial and institutional water usage was down 3% and 4% respectively. It's important to note, though, that again, we're comparing this period to 2020. And if we recall, in 2020, we were in COVID, and so a lot of businesses were shut down. So comparing to 2020, we do see an increase in 23% consumption. That's because businesses were off in 2020, but now they're operating, which is good, right? We're getting back to work, and we're getting back to transitioning to a new normal of activity. But if we look at their commercial usage in non-COVID years, they're following that 3 to 4% conservation trend, which means that they're also doing their part to help save water. Next slide. And then, a lot of folks that I talk to want to know, well, how is SCV Water performing in its conservation relative to similar communities, as well as to the state in general? So the state of California is broken down into 10 hydrologic zones and regions, and we are located in the South Coast. So the state of California, we're seeing for the month of December, had 17.1% reduction compared to December 2020, and their cumulative conservation, which is through July 2021 through December 2022, compared to 2020 levels, was down 6%. For the South Coast, it's down 20.3%. The whole region, everybody in the South Coast, is down 20.3% for the month of December, and their cumulative for the same period of July through December 2022 is 4.9%. But look at SCV Water here. We can see what we were like in December. We were down 36.3%. So we well outperformed, nearly double of the average of the state of California for the month of December. That's great work to our customers and really showing that conservation activities and behaviors were taking hold here in the valley. A lot of water saved in the month of December, taking advantage of that rain that we had, and also surpassed the South Coast. So that means we're doing really well. Our cumulative conservation is right in between, about down 5.5%. So we're in between the state 6% and the South Coast 4.9%. So we're right on track. But look at this number. Since May 2022, SCV Water customers conserved 8,213 acre feet. So using Sarah's image she shared with us before, you could take a football field and put it under 8,213 feet of water. That's how much water compared to 2020 since May that our customers have conserved. That's about 2.676 billion gallons of water for those folks who might want to see that in a more residential, kind of consumer-friendly term there. Next slide, please. All right, so community conservation in action. What I want to share here, you can see that our community's done a lot to conserve water. A lot of folks have taken action, from very small, simple things to the more complex long-term actions, fixing leaks to converting landscapes to other wholesale transformations. And while it's difficult, I can't go and showcase every customer that took every level of action, we do recognize all the customers that have and thank them for their commitment towards water conservation and water use efficiency. But in this case, we're going to showcase and highlight some of the SCV Water water conservation champions. Next slide. First and foremost, I definitely need to put the spotlight on the city of Santa Clarita. Their drought conservation performance has been absolutely stellar. Their average monthly savings during that time since stage 2 was declared has been 25%. So they've outpaced the average savings that we're seeing across various different customer classes. We were able to measure and confirm that's about 113 million gallons of water for 347.6 acre feet. But what did they do? Well, they participate in our monthly Sustainable Water Action Task Force, along with the Los Angeles County staff and SCV Water staff. We meet monthly to collaborate, coordinate, and develop partnerships and ways to better serve our community. And they are very active participants. They also deployed smart irrigation technologies with smart controllers, and as well as irrigation efficiency optimization efforts, including point irrigation, high efficiency sprinklers, and other types of components to help them better manage their water usage. They also turned off their irrigation during the storms. Their usage dropped to near zero during the months when we had water usage, except for some places that were being, established, but their usage would just plummeted during the storms. So they were responsive to that. And they've also taken the lead and taken community leadership on repairing leaks and correcting irrigation runoff. And for customers that see those types of things, the city welcomes customers notifying it if they see a broken sprinkler or leak, and they get to it pretty quickly. And the city has an app you can download on your cell phone that you can use to communicate with the city if you see those types of things. And it's fairly easy to use. But the city has also done long-term conservation activities, including its multi-year median beautification program. This is something that it implemented during the previous drought, which it took the grass off of the medians in the city and put in drought-tolerant, water-efficient landscape plants, as well as point irrigation to help them reduce their runoff and their overall irrigation need for those sites. So well done to the city of Santa Clarita. Next. Another partner that's demonstrated some conservation activities that stands out is the Saugus Union School District. The Saugus Union School District has taken action to save a verified saving of over 1 million gallons. And they're, of course, a much smaller entity than the city, and they do manage the schools, indoor water usage, their facilities, and their play areas. So for them to take this action to get 1 million gallons saved since they've implemented these savings is enormous. And we estimate that those actions will save about 2 million gallons per year going forward, whether we're in droughts or not. So what did they do? Well, they converted to 13,245 square feet to drought-tolerant sustainable landscapes, as shown in the picture to the right. They converted 56,049 square feet to drip irrigation. That's a great thing to do because instead of using spray irrigation to have to irrigate all that space, drip irrigation lets it put water right to the plant and lets that water be distributed very slowly so that the soil can absorb it for use rather than running off. And they did this at 4 different school sites. So a great job to Saugus Union School District. Next slide. And let's turn to our multifamily apartment customers who've also taken action during the drought to achieve significant conservation. We've verified that the actions they've taken so far is about 27.788 million gallons of water. That's a huge volume of water for these customers. Their estimated annual savings was 21, so they've outperformed what the engineering estimations were. And that's probably because the engineering estimates look at usage of devices, and it's very sometimes difficult to quantify the number of leaks and the volume of leaks. But in this case, we quantified afterwards at 6 million gallons a year was being lost to leaks, whereas the other 21 million is saved through installing efficiency devices. What did they do? Well, they installed 2,728 premium high-efficiency toilets that use 1 gallon per flush. They installed 480 high-efficiency plumbing retrofit and faucet and fixture devices. They inspected 116 irrigation zones, and they did this at 2 different sites, including leak detection, which is about 500 units. So these 2 apartment complexes, which have participated in our programs, kudos to them for doing amazing work to save water and yet continue to provide high quality of water service to its customers, and also a partnership with the agency to accomplish their water use efficiency goals. Next slide. So now I want to turn to SCV Water residents, and this is kind of looking at during the whole drought period, kind of looking at the aggregation of activity that you, our customers, have implemented to help save water during this drought. Again, this doesn't capture every activity. It captures the activities that customers have documented in participation with the agency. So there's things that have happened and occurred that we can see in our total production reductions that are beyond this, but this is certainly a great things that our customers have done in partnership with SCV Water by participating in our conservation programs. That includes 926 checkups, which are drought, irrigation, and leak detection. Over 1,000 residential water use efficiency kits distributed to customers. Those are provided at no cost. The surveys are also, or checkups are provided at no cost as well. Customers converted 72,404 square feet of turf to sustainable landscapes. 395 smart controllers were installed. That's about 2,294 stations. Each station is when you turn your sprinklers on, one zone comes on or one station. So that's 2,294 stations that are now irrigating to the weather, but also turning off when it's raining, and then taking those occurrences into its mathematics when programming the scheduling. We see 22,389 square feet converted to drip irrigation, over 1,600 HE irrigation nozzles installed, 584 pressure regulating bodies with check valves. Check valves are great because they can be put at the in your sprinkler system with the body. And so what happens is when the sprinkler system turns off, typically water will continue to follow gravity and go towards the lowest point and slowly leak out of the body and through drainage. And what a check valve does is when it turns off, it not only reduces the pressure when the system's on, but when it turns off, it stops water from leaking out. So your system, that water stays in your system instead of slowly leaking out. We saw 60 pool cover rebated, and 340 customers participated in our online Water Smart workshop, which is a workshop that customers can attend and get $20 credit by doing a DIY, a do-it-yourself kind of checkup. Next. So I just wanted to give some examples and showcase some of the projects that customers did. Here, this resident took the grass out in their front yard as well in the parkway strip and installed beautiful, sustainable landscape, including low water use plants and California natives and SCV natives. These are drought tolerant. So this action right here not only helps save water during the drought, but will help save water in perpetuity as long as that landscape remains. Next slide. Here's another great example of a yard that was converted from grass to drought tolerant landscapes. On a side note, it should be noted that turf grass, the cool season grass we see here often in front yards, requires anywhere from 8 to 12 feet of water per square foot per year. 8 if you're taking kind of good efficiency, 12 if you have not very good distribution uniformity or irrigation efficiency, whereas drought tolerant plants and drought tolerant landscapes can use anywhere from 2 to about 4 feet of water per square foot. So you're reducing from 4 to 8 feet of water down to 2 to 4. It's a great way to save water in perpetuity. Next slide. Another beautiful project. This one probably is going to have a little bit more water intensity, but even though it's 100% coverage here, it's still going to use about half of what your typical cool season grass would use in a year. It's got some nice color to it. Here's an example of high efficiency nozzles being used on a yard. This can improve your irrigation efficiency from about 50 to 60% irrigation efficiency to about 80%, which means that you're going to get better performance out of your irrigation use, but you're also going to have reduce things like runoff and losses to over irrigating. So these are a really great solution for those folks who want to keep grass. They can help you reduce your water usage by 20-30%. Depending on how your irrigation efficiency is. But again, they put water out so slowly that it has an opportunity to absorb in the soil before running off, because we do have very our soils here are clay. They don't absorb water very well. They absorb it very slowly. And so if you have a traditional sprinkler in place, after about 4 minutes, you're going to see irrigation runoff. Whereas these, you're not going to see irrigation runoff till about 30 to 40 minutes. So pretty good nozzles there. Next slide. And drip irrigation is a great solution for plants in yards or yards with plants that are not required to have full coverage or need overhead irrigation. There's 2 different types that we often see in use, and that's the inline drip irrigation on the left. That one's pretty cool. It's a tube that has an emitter every 6, 12, or 18 inches. That's a gallon per hour, and you just put that through your yard, and it waters your landscape, and you can see it reduces irrigation runoff and also gets good coverage to all the plants. It absorbs into the soil instead of misting losses as well as runoff losses. And the other one that's common is the 1/4-inch emitter drip irrigation, like shown on the right, where you've got the feed tube, and then you have a 1/4-inch tube that comes off of it with an emitter that goes to each plant. Next slide. So after the storms, where does this leave us? Where are we heading? You know, when you look at the aridification trends, this is a terminology and a concept that hydrologists, climatologists, water managers, and other folks have been looking at the dry trending of the state. While we definitely had a deluge this year, the Western United States and the state of California is expecting to see aridification that will essentially create really dry soils that are going to need to absorb more and more water when it arrives. So that itself might reduce the availability of our water by about 10% or more in future years because of the need to absorb and replenish those losses in groundwater. So a drying trend, essentially. But then we also look at the, you know, you add that to our California drought cycles. The little image to the right shows our drought cycles since 2000. We're seeing them get more intense. They're becoming more frequent, and they're longer. So, you know, we're all certainly very used to droughts here in California, but the drought cycle itself appears to be changing if we look at the past between now and 2000, where those droughts are coming on faster, they're more intense, and they last longer. So add that to the next item, which is storage recovery and storage growth. You know, Sarah was showing in her slides that our usage and our storage and our bank and exchanges went from about 165,000 to 95,000 roughly. This is off top of my head. That's a 45% reduction in our bank supplies that we're going to need to recover. So when we think about a year like now, where we have this surplus of water, or we might get you know, a deluge, or we might get a higher allocation depending on how that pans out, we're going to want to continue you know, we're kind of in recovery mode where we're going to take those supplies and replenish that 45% reduction so that we have that water available for those future dry years that we know are going to happen and we're very accustomed to here in California. And then lastly, you add that to inefficient and incompatible demands. And what I mean is that there's still quite a bit of inefficiency in our demands, and there's a lot of incompatibility in our demands. For example, cool season grass requiring more water than what Mother Nature provides here certainly is incompatible. And that's a great opportunity for us to transform those landscapes to have better outcomes, more water efficient, and then of course, lower water usage year after year. So you take aridification trends, our drought cycles, our need to have storage recovery and storage growth, our inefficient and incompatible demands, and what you're going to see, and I think another thing is long-term conservation framework and new mandates from the state that are coming on next year. I think there's an increased need for sustainable water conservation and efficient water use demands, landscapes, practices, and habits, so that we can have more sustainable demands and be better prepared for future droughts, as well as future changes to what we're seeing in the overall hydrology here in the state. Yeah, I think continued conservation is a smart, as our tongue twister said earlier, it is the wise and smart path. Next slide. And with that, it's important to note that together we are making water conservation a California way of life, so that we can sustain, protect, and continue to enjoy the wonderful, exciting, and just beautiful lifestyles that we have here in the state of California. With that, I'm going to ask one last poll question here. Thank you guys very much for listening to me share all that exciting data. Let's see what our last poll question is here. I guess in this case, would you like to receive more information about our water savings, rebates, and programs? You can answer yes or no. Okay, well, great. We have 10 customers. 77% would like to get some information. For those of you, you may not want the information right now, which makes sense. Maybe you're already employing some of these measures, but just note that by going to yourscvwater.com, or droughtreadyscv.com. You can get that information. And should you need it in the future, we're always here to help. It's been my pleasure to be here tonight. Thank you for sharing your time with us, and I'll pass it back to Laura.
All right, great. Thank you, Matt. We're going to actually have all of our speakers come online. I'm going to ask a couple of questions that we have from the Q&A and see who would like to take those questions. All right, so first question we have in here is, why is the city considering lots of construction and new products if we are short on water supplies? Sarah? Okay.
Yeah, do you want me to take that one?
Okay.
So basically, the county and the city of Santa Clarita are actually responsible for development plans. And these projects happen years and years and years in advance as they're kind of figuring out how Santa Clarita is going to be built out. So as you see new projects coming online through droughts and things like that, these are projects that have been planned for years and years in advance. Santa Clarita is not built out quite yet. Those are the agencies that are responsible for the planning and approving the planning of new projects. And then Santa Clarita Valley Water Agency is actually responsible for providing water for those new developments. And every year every 5 years, we update what we call the Urban Water Management Plan. And that kind of lets us look out into the future and say, okay, how much is Santa Clarita going to be continuing to grow? And we actually manage all the water supplies to make sure that we do have enough supplies for customers as the city continues to grow. One thing to note, and maybe Matt can add to this too, a lot of the new developments coming online are much more efficient than historical homes out in the valley. I believe like one of the facts is that Santa Clarita has grown, the population has doubled, but our water use has only increased by about 13% in the time that it's doubled. So fixtures are becoming more efficient and things like that. And so see if I answered the question, please. If there's any follow-up, I'm happy to go into more detail.
Yeah, Sarah, I just want to, kind of piggyback on what you said, and that is certainly new development is going to be using new technologies and new practices in developing those homes. So you're going to have, typically less footprint, more efficient devices and faucets and fixtures inside the homes, and then also landscapes that are designed to be more climate appropriate. And I guess it's important to note too, though, that those customers, when they, that development occurs and somebody moves into them, they need to conserve water too. So it's something that conservation is a shared endeavor that we should always be, looking to accomplish, because we need to put our water to beneficial use. And that's why we focus on eliminating and reducing waste, where we believe that serving families is certainly not a waste of water, but water running down the gutters or leaks or things that are very inefficient uses. Those are things that we can take action on, and those are uses that exist. So by us taking action on that, we can save water and then still comply with those urban plans that you mentioned.
I think one last thing to add would be that some of the developments can also come with their own sources of supply. So the developer can own water rights and say, hey, we have water rights that we can provide if we're able to build here, or they can also build their own water treatment plants to increase the volume of recycled water to kind of offset whatever use they're going to, whatever demands that they're going to be needing. So there's other aspects of the development as well.
And I see the second question is somewhat similar, so I may add a little bit more about water supplies to kind of get the full picture. But with regards to water supplies, The current drought that we are in, I know I showed some slides with our dry year reserve storages, and you saw how each year we were able to pull water from our dry year reserves to help us meet demands. And so technically there's no quotes shortage in Santa Clarita water supplies through this drought, but we were mandated to implement conservation because the entire state wasn't as lucky. And so other agencies didn't have the water supplies available. And so we were all working together to make California conservation a California way of life, and just be more efficient. But officially with water supplies, there's no technical shortage. We just ask people to be more responsible during drought periods. And Matt may go into that a little bit more as well with regards to the regulations. And we have, and like, this is a slide that we, we move this question and answer out of the way. So this is the slide that shows we had over 160,000 acre feet of storage in reserve in case of these dry years. We used about 20 to 25,000 acre feet a year in the last 3 years. So we have 90,000 acre feet still left. That is enough water for about 3 more years of really severe drought. And this drought that we've been experiencing has been extremely severe. Our imported water supplies were constrained more than we have had in the past. So we're kind of experiencing some new drought periods, and we're doing lots of planning to make sure we can get through those with as little impact to customers as possible.
All right, thank you, Sarah. We have another question. When will Santa Clarita start using reclaimed water?
I guess I'll start. So I believe we've been using reclaimed water for, has it been like 20 years, Matt? I can't remember how long specifically, but we've been averaging just around a little under 500 acre feet of recycled water use per year. And in our area, we use that for irrigation at golf courses, some of the medians, things like that. And our recycled water system is expanding right now. So we're trying to get infrastructure, more infrastructure on the west end of town. I believe there's more infrastructure going in on the east side of town as well. And then Matt and his conservation team are working with finding customers that are ready to use recycled water for irrigation. We can't use all the water that goes into the river from our reclamation plants because there are some environmental things going on, and basically the environment gets the water and we can't take all of that. So Ernesto is actually working on some programs so that we can utilize new recycled water from some of the new development. So water that hasn't reached the river yet and hasn't created environment will now be able to be used as recycled water. So it's expanding, and I'll let you guys kind of go into that more.
Yeah, that was a great explanation, Sarah. But yes, we do currently use recycled water. We are expanding. We're finding some new creative ways to expand. But to answer the question shortly is yes, we are currently using recycled water.
All right, so I don't see any more questions coming in. We could take probably one more question as we are getting close to time. All right, well, I think you guys all covered everything. That's always great news. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight, and a huge thank you to Water Resources Planner Sarah Fleury, Ernesto Velasquez, and Sustainability Manager Matt Dickens for their presentation. Tonight's webinar was recorded, and a link to view the recording along with the survey and web links mentioned during the webinar will be sent via email tomorrow. And with that, thank you and have a great night.